Chapter 76, The Dwarves. Did I harass Volsung so much that he sent over some stranger just to make me shut up? It's me, Aldi. Why are you so surprised? You are a human. Well observed, but no. I am only a tree in humanoid form covered up by some transformation magic to make it look more realistic. To support my words, I released the transformation for a second before reapplying it. Seeing my more tree-like form somehow calmed Aldi down a great deal. Well then, it is nice to meet you again after so many years. I'd like you to meet Sindri, the greatest dwarven smith. From behind Aldi, a stout dwarf wearing shiny blue armor stepped out and shook my hand. Common people would perhaps say that he had a strong grip, but to me, it felt like he barely exerted any force. Since I wasn't sure if I could control my strength, I opted for using as little strength as possible. Which the dwarf of course noticed immediately. Your handshake doesn't seem very enthusiastic. Do you dislike dwarves? Like all dwarves, he seemed to be awfully straightforward. That is not the case. I'm not yet accustomed to this body, and feared to use too much force. Do you take us dwarves to be weak? He was a dwarf, so talking wouldn't solve this problem. I grew a fist-sized sphere of heavenly steel. I trust you are aware of the properties of heavenly steel? Of course. That's what I am here for. Then watch closely. This is what I meant with I can't fully control my force. I wrapped my hand around the sphere and applied some force. Under the shocked gazes of Aldi and Sindri, the sphere was quickly deformed as my fingers sunk into the steel. Opening my hand, I dropped the recognizably deformed sphere. What splendid strength! Compared to you, we dwarves can truly be called weak. And that was how one resolved a misunderstanding with dwarves. Others may feel insulted, but most dwarves preferred a painfully open style of conversation where both parties just said whatever came to mind. Now then, you said you were here for the heavenly steel? Indeed, I took a look at Aldi's gauntlet and found it wasn't only incredibly durable, but also heat, corrosion, and magic resistant. What is it even made of? Originally, using an innate understanding of light or similar attributes to create a certain pattern of magic. Through that, a kind of material is created that resembles what we call a metal, just that its properties are vastly superior to most natural metals. How can you divulge such precious information so openly? King Sigmund has this innate understanding of light you are talking about, couldn't he too make it then? He doesn't know the pattern, so he can't make it. I said nothing about the layering and pattern structure, and that's the knowledge that is precious. Then how do you know it? Who taught you? Aldi brought me a piece of it and I analyzed it. And no, others can't do that, it's a tree thing. But anyway, you can't have come here just to ask me that. I have attempted to make some changes to Aldi's gauntlets, but I couldn't bend the metal in any way. Is there a way to shape it? Also, can I have more of it? Well, you can melt it down if you have a strong enough flame. Something on the level of dragon fire, or preferably even stronger. If you want to trade for some, that can also be arranged, but only if you have something that catches my interest. Dragon flame or stronger? That's impossible. No one ever said it was going to be easy. If you want, I can help you look for one once I travel to the Dwarven lands. That would be great. Once you arrive in Nidavellir, ask for Brock and Sindri's forge and you'll have no trouble finding us. Having said his piece, Sindri walked past me and left the building. Did he just leave? That's just how he is. The average dwarven lifespan is 300 years. He will just wait for you to come to visit him, and if you don't show up within 10 years, he will either have forgotten you or come harass you. Chapter 77, Journey to the West. Being left alone with Aldi, I found that I had nothing to say to him. Since the night he asked for my origin, a chasm had opened up between us. Without trust, a merchant couldn't make a good deal. We exchanged some common courtesies, but ultimately parted without any substantial conversation. Later I went to find Volsing and found him sitting in his office signing documents. I always thought you to be more of a warrior than a bureaucrat. Can't you let someone else handle the paperwork? Usually I do just that. But these matters are too important to be handed to someone else, so I have to do it myself. Enough of this boring stuff. When do you plan on leaving? By tomorrow morning. I don't like the whole development in the north, and I want to visit the dwarves. Then you will be heading east, towards Nidavellir? No, I plan to go west first and check up on Nerita and Sven. Then I'll head north, to see the frontiers. You intend to cross through the lands of the dead? Do you expect me to go all the way around them? Eldar. That's the place where all races used to bury their dead. King-level entities aren't uncommon. Then how did you manage to hold them back? Without the suppression of the older generation and your apples that were circulated, many managed to break through in recent years. It's just that most of them are at the frontier, so you didn't notice. I'll be fine. I'll be back in a few years. Last time you said that you were gone for 70 years. Just get going and leave me a full storage of apples. After I had filled the cellar with various kinds of apples, I headed out of the mansion and left the city. This time through the gate because Volsing had handed me a ring that held some kind of authority and let me pass the gate without trouble. Now, gotta find Sven since he is somewhere in this forest. Me being a tree coupled with the benefit of having an innate understanding of life made finding someone in a forest awfully easy. I walked up to a random tree and established a connection with the forest. Sven was to the west and right en route to the volcanic mountains, where Nerita should be. Walking was so excruciatingly slow. Traversing the distance between myself and Sven had only taken a few moments when I had done it through the forest connection. But actually walking all that way was many times slower. Wasn't there a faster way? Wait, if my steps were bigger, I could traverse a larger distance with every step and travel faster. Wanting to test out this idea of mine, I increased my body size to 20 meters and broke into a sprint. My speed rose exponentially as I practically flew past the trees. Naturally, the transformation magic that made me look human ceased to work and I looked like a tree giant. Since it would still take some time to reach Sven's position, I increased my size further to around 250 meters. My speed reached a new high as I continuously advanced towards Sven's position. Closing in on the location I had last detected him, I slowed down and returned to my human form. Witnessing a tree giant running towards himself would certainly not be part of a good reunion as I imagined it. Connecting to the forest once again, I locked in on Sven's exact position, a mountain not too far off. There he was, sitting cross-legged on the highest point. I quietly approached him and intended to wait for him to wake from his meditation. So, how long are you going to just stand there? Did you really think I wouldn't notice a giant tree man running over here? I just didn't want to interrupt you, in case you were still in the process of advancing. Well, no need to worry, I successfully advanced a few days ago. I just stayed here to use the piece and try to get some comprehensions for my next advancement. I didn't think you would come looking for me. Good to see that you are back. Chapter 78, Sven. Then you successfully broke through the shackles of your bloodlines and received a dragon's bloodline? What did you get? Wind dragon, tempest dragon, storm dragon. I had sufficient ability in both wind and lightning to mutate a second time. It's all thanks to the lightning origin fruit you grow once a year. After Ratatoskr ate it, I went through the effort of collecting all the scraps and made them into apple juice. Enriched with some lightning apples, I made it a permanent component of my diet. By now, elemental apple juice is one of our major exports. Lightning origin fruit? Is that how you call my enlightenment fruit? Seeing that I comprehended it by consuming a lightning origin, it kind of makes sense. But enough of all that, show me your transformation. Sure thing. Beast mode. His dragon form was substantially different from before. His greenish scales were replaced by dark grayish ones that held a purple luster. Also, different from Volsung, Sven's transformation seemed much more complete. He was now barely humanoid anymore and had turned into a near-complete eastern dragon. A long snake-like main body with short arms and multiple pairs of wings. At the end of his tail, there was a peculiar shape that reminded me of the feathers of an arrow. All in all, I got the impression that this wasn't a body built for close-quarter combat and large-scale destruction like most dragons. This shape was more suited for hit-and-run or surprise tactics. Sven had been a hunter before I recruited him. It would seem that a person's prior experiences might be able to influence their beast form. So, what do you think? Looks neat, doesn't it? In his dragon form, Sven had a raspy deep voice that was interlaced with a low rumbling. Hearing his questions, I recounted my analysis of his newly gained form. I never really thought about it, but you are right. I much prefer attacking from an ambush and taking the enemy by surprise. Open combat just isn't my style. Guess I'm heading in the right direction then. There is no right direction. There is only the direction you chose to take. Right or wrong is just a concept to make us feel better. So head in your direction, do as you believe you must. If everyone did that, wouldn't the world sink into chaos? I'm not telling this to everyone. I'm telling you. Some people need encouragement, others need to be held back. Once again, this is just a choice of the one talking. I never knew you liked philosophy. Did you meet some sage in the past and repeat his teachings? No, I don't think I have met someone who calls themselves a sage in the sense of the word. But once, a long time ago, I read some books about the philosophy of an ancient era. In those scriptures, I found many thoughts and ideas that I could relate to. I'd forgotten most of them, but just now you made me remember them when you talked about the right direction. You sound like an old man. Technically, I am an old man. You sure don't look the part. What I see is a fair-skinned youth who barely reached adulthood. The physical body is but a vessel for the mind and soul. Do not be deceived easily, one's appearance can be changed quite easily. Instead, judge people's actions and words, those will often tell you more than looks ever can. Sure. Now, where are you headed off to next, and can I join you? Next, I'm planning on finding Narita. Apparently, she's in the volcanic mountains doing something related to her bloodline. If you want to, you're welcome to tag along. I'll gladly join you then. However, can you lower your speed a bit? Even in beast mode, I won't be able to keep up with your strides. That was indeed a thing to be considered. I decided to only grow 50 meters tall, which would make it possible for Sven to keep up. Now then, we're off to the volcanic mountains. Let's go find Narita. Despite my reduction in speed, it took us only a few days to reach the edge of the forest. There we found the river Yfang. After crossing it, we would be on the outskirts of the volcanic mountains. Chapter 79, The Frontier is in Shambles. Getting over the fast-flowing river before us wasn't much of a challenge. I just walked right through, and Sven flew over it. On the other side, I stepped on a giant road. This thing was so broad and sturdy that it seemed somewhat out of place. Why is there a road all the way out here? You don't know? This is the Bifrost, the Rainbow Road. Looks pretty gray to me. Where's the rainbow? Originally, this road began in Asgard and should end in Midgard. It was made with rainbow-colored crystals to show the Aesir's superiority, but even they couldn't sustain the expanse. Halfway through, they went to war with the Jotuns and redirected the road to Jotunheim. It's become a border between the volcanic mountains and your forest. Those Aesir really did put a lot of importance on boasting about their financial prowess. They have a golden city, a giant fortress, and now a crystal rainbow road. Yeah, that golden city is not so golden anymore. Really? I feel there is a story behind this. Do tell. Magni, Thor's son, wanted to obtain your lightning origin fruit. He was only a newly minted Grand Duke Magus and thought he could break through to King Magus early with it. He feared Volsung's interference and paid a huge sum of gold to bribe all of us to stay out of it. Did he succeed? I can hardly imagine him being unable to get new gold after becoming a King Magus. Well, he didn't account for Radatoskr's strength. He marched up with the Empire's remaining elites and attacked Ratatoskr when he tried to get the fruit. More than 2,000 spells crashed into that squirrel and it didn't even get a scratch. They did royally piss him off though. Ratatoskr went into a frenzy and wiped out half the Aesir present, including Magni. Throughout the whole thing, that monster got hit by so many attacks but remained completely unharmed. Actually, do you know what level he is at? I have no clue. Rat's definitely on par with a King Magus, but if it really ate all those apples, he might be a lot stronger now. Just at that moment, a red flare burst in the skies to the north. This is bad. Majorly bad. Why, what's happening? That flare is the distress signal from the frontier. Red means the main defense line has been breached and the reserves don't think they can hold on for long. We have to go there right away. You are faster than me, go ahead. We can't let the undead get out. That's serious? I was a bit uneasy after Sven's words. I jumped up into the sky and summoned my innate understanding of lightning. Electric moon. The crackling current flows past all places you shine upon. I am the current and my existence is omnipresent below the heavens. Lightning domain shift. I could feel the fabric of the world ripple as my domain spread out around me. In the blink of an eye, the surroundings around me had changed and I was only a short distance away from where the flare had come. I was still in the air and could see the chaos below. The main defensive line was still roughly visible. Due to the mountainous terrain, the undead were driven to certain choke points where a valley let them pass the otherwise unpassable, natural barrier. This place was one such valley, and a makeshift wall had been built to hold them back. From the air, however, I noticed a fatal flaw in the wall's defensive capabilities. There was a gaping hole in the wall and masses of undead were charging through. Above the broken part of the wall, I spied the perpetrators of this catastrophe. Two figures in grey cloaks were giving of eerie vibes while fighting a human King Magus. Evidently, the two undead King Magi held the upper hand in the whole fight and one of them had probably used this opportunity to blast the wall. Behind the breached wall, the reserve forces were desperately trying to contain the mass of undead. However, the undead fought without concern for their own body and wore down those few reserve troops quickly. This was really bothersome. I was now on a higher level than in my previous life and most of the spells I knew wouldn't be able to bring out my full strength. The only spell I knew was a fundamental domain application. The signature move of mages in the Grey Empire, Moon Domain. It couldn't be helped. Domain application was very useful due to its variety. Before, I had used my lightning domain to move here at an incredible speed. Now I needed to turn this battle around. Chapter 80, Fake Kings. Vibrant Moon. The life-giving current flows past all places you shine upon. Where I stand all life shall prosper. Domain of life, eternal growth. In the sky above me a pale, light green moon appeared and filled the area around with a green glow. A soothing tide washed over all the combatants on the side of the living, healed their wounds, and gave them new strength. The landslide victory that the undead had been enjoying was abruptly turned into a temporary stalemate. The undead King Magi grew slightly agitated. They commenced a pincer attack that put their lives on the line to kill the human magus. If I let that happen, all my prior efforts would be wasted. Unwilling to let that happen, I condensed lightning in my fist and joined the fray. Life and lightning, two elements that were the bane of all undead. The life domain I had spread out was primarily focused on supporting the defending force and thus didn't really affect the undead. However, the lightning in my fist was driven by an innate understanding and was meant to harm. The undead King Magi hadn't seen me as a threat because they had assumed I was busy casting my life spell. Too bad for them, a domain was a passive thing and I could give them my fullest attention. When my fist landed on one of the cloaked figure's backs, the lightning spread furiously and tore the figure apart completely. This was way too easy. A King Magus shouldn't go down that easily even if they were hit by their weakness. Were they forcefully promoted? I wanted to verify my guess, but the human King Magus had already drowned the second undead Magus in an ocean of fire. I'll leave the rest to you. I'm glad you made it in time. Summoning this last attack, the King Magus had used up the remains of his power and plummeted out of the sky. I quickly moved to catch him and brought him down to the human encampment. Without their king-level leaders, the other undead seemed to lose all hope and retreated promptly. A human Grand Duke Magus approached me as I landed. Greetings, Lord Magus. I am the deputy commander of this camp. Thank you for coming to our rescue and saving Commander Ragnar. Will you assume command until Commander Ragnar wakes up? That won't be necessary, I leave the commanding to you. If my guess is right, there will be more flares up in the sky before night falls. Why do you think so? There are many encampments along the border and there can only be so many undead King Magi. Let me ask you, have you seen any undead on the Grand Duke level during this attack? No, why? I fear that whoever sent these creatures has used some means to forcefully promote a large number of Grand Duke level undead to the King level. Is that even possible? Wouldn't this make them invincible? No. Firstly, the price for such a feat must be exorbitant. Secondly, this will bring numerous drawbacks and only works under the right circumstances. I hate to say it, but if those had been true King Magi, your commander wouldn't have been able to hold them back by himself. Are undead Magi that strong? It's not the fact that they are undead. It's a difference in the grade of understanding. Death is much more complicated than fire and thus if comprehended to the same degree, death will surely triumph. But these two undead didn't match that level of power. Also, their defense was sorely lacking. While we were talking, I walked over to the breach in the wall. With a wave of my hand, a wall of trees grew and the breach was temporarily sealed. Anyway, I'll stay here until the next flare appears. Can I have the undead King Magi's remains to research? You want them? Take them then. What about your rewards? Rewards? Killing undead of the Duke level and above will be specially rewarded to increase people's motivation. You killed a King Magus, naturally, you should receive your corresponding reward. I don't really have the capacity to accept that right now, I'd like to keep my baggage light. But in a day or so, a Grand Duke Magus named Sven will arrive. Hand my rewards to him and tell him that Lord Eldar wants him to stay here and help defend this place. With all due respect, a Grand Duke Magus isn't going to make much of a difference in the face of king-level threats. Just deliver the message, you'll see soon enough. With that, I walked over to where the undead remains should be.